I started working in restaurants when I was 16. For me, cooking was something that it was probably my favorite activity to do. I've loved food. And so getting into the restaurant industry when I was a teenager, it was something that I always knew I wanted to do. It was a passion. And I realized that you don't have to be a lawyer to do social change, that food is social justice, that you can do so much through the food that we serve every day by bringing people together. You're creating moments of social change and social good every day. And I was hooked. I think as a trans business owner, there are a lot of unique challenges that I face. And for me, one of the reasons why I want to always be so public about being a trans business owner is there aren't many of us. It's a really unique position to be in, to be a trans person and to own a business. I don't have the fear of getting fired for disclosing who I am. And that's an environment that I try and create for all of my employees here, that everyone gets to be their self at work. Every business in this neighborhood is a small business, but that meant that the pandemic was incredibly challenging for this neighborhood. Over half the local businesses closed. They didn't make it through these 3 years. So it's grants like this that are helping keep this neighborhood alive. So I worked with the GSBA, which is a phenomenal organization that supports GLBT small businesses. And it's an organization that I have just the highest regard and respect for. They truly helped all these small businesses get through the pandemic in ways that I don't think we'll ever be able to repay them for. Community is at the heart of what we do as a small business, as a restaurant, bringing people together around great food and great drinks. And I think Comcast understands that. They understand neighborhoods matter, small businesses matter. The Ready for Business grant was huge. It was so important for us to help support our staff through the pandemic and through reopening all the locations. I'm so thankful to Comcast for the support that they've given us and to so many other small businesses.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our September Civic Cocktail. We're back from our summer break. It's so wonderful to see all of you back here again. I know it's a crazy week already, coming off of Labor Day. Got to go back to work, got to go back to school. People starting to get the little COVID again. Don't do that. Be healthy. We're so happy you're here. I'm Alicia Crank. I'm the executive director of City Club, and welcome to the collective. We have so much fun here. We also do a real civic cocktail. So for those of you at home who are not seeing what we have, our signature cocktail for today is the Civic Blackberry Mule. I'm not going to drink it on stage, but several people in the audience are enjoying them. So if you haven't had one yet and you're here, you really should have one. I am so excited about tonight's topics. Believe it or not, they are connected, whether we talk about jobs and affordability, but also about major sports in Seattle. There's a lot of it that has to do with affordability here and what it takes to become a major city that does what we do and how we do it well. So, we have been busy. So even though we took the summer off, we really didn't. Because now that we're back, we have 12, including this one, different events that we're doing between now and the end of the year, all civically engaged, and including our Seattle City Council debate series that we will be doing for districts 1, 3, 4, and 5 in their respective districts. So that is really major for us, and I think major for our community members. So please make sure you visit our website, get more information, register, tell people, share, share, share. So with that, I want to jump into our first conversation around jobs and affordability in Seattle. Now, I know that many of us have heard so many news stories around you have to make $35, $40 an hour to be able to live here or to afford to live here, whatever afford means to you. But the conversation usually stops there. There's never any conversation around, well, what are those jobs? How does one get those kind of jobs and careers? How does someone restart their work life to be able to remain being here? And so we wanted to have kind of a solutions-based conversation around this, and that is where our three panelists come into play, because we're going to talk about those things, but also what are some of the inequities that have been showcased through the pandemic around jobs, and how are we addressing them now that we're returning back to work, whether we're still working from home or in person. So with us tonight, we have Rob Smith, who was supposed to be our moderator, so thank you for subbing with us at the last minute. Unfortunately, John Scholes couldn't be here tonight, but we look forward to having him at a future Civic Cocktail. Rob is the executive editor of Seattle Magazine and Seattle Business Magazine. Aparna Ray is the founder of Moving Beyond. And Mike Schwartz, what is your title now? Director of Economic Empowerment at YWCA. And I just do that to him because we used to work together. So he might know some stuff about me, so get him on the break. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves to all of you, and then we'll jump into the conversation. And we will start with Rob.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to everybody for taking time out of a busy schedule to be here tonight. So real quick, I originally wanted to be in politics, and that fizzled out. And then I got a job as a bartender and a house painter. I was 24 years old. I played basketball every day, drank way too much beer. One of the best jobs of my life. I had a buddy who got a job as a sports editor at a community newspaper, and he needed help covering sports events. It was $15 a game then, and I needed the money, so I would drive and cover girls basketball and volleyball and soccer and things like that. And the editors liked what I was doing, and they gave me a job as a news reporter. And to make a long story short, as Mark Twain said, I had no other skills, so I became a journalist. And now I get paid to be nosy. It's the best job in the world.
I don't know, like, what can I say that to go after this? But I will say, I think I actually made more money doing a very similar job in high school, $5.25 an hour to take photographs of sports situations in high school and college. Yeah, not a sports person. My name is Aparna. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I am the founder of an HR and DEI tech startup. It's my fourth company, and so I think I'm a little bit tired. I too did not have the summer off, but yeah, my career has been a little bit windy. Public school teacher, union organizer, and somehow fell backwards into the job that I do now, and grateful for it, and to be here.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to be part of this panel. Very excited to talk about this topic, which is not necessarily very optimistic, but it is one that's very important. I'm Mike Schwartz. I am Director of Economic Empowerment, and I do go back a ways with Alicia, and very excited to share the stage with her, a fellow Detroiter as well. I oversee all of our employment and training and financial literacy programs at the YWCA, and we work with people in the city who are considered furthest from opportunity. That those folks are at the center of what we do and why we do it. And so I hope to bring some of their voices into the conversation tonight to talk about the challenges that they're facing around affordability and jobs in Seattle, and how the YWCA is playing a role to hopefully help them overcome those challenges.
Welcome, everybody. So with that, let's jump into numbers. Now, I know we were right before we went live here, we were talking about what is that number based on data and statistics that says that you have to make a certain amount of money, whether you're single or have children. Can you break that down for us? You guys were just talking about.
Yeah, so we use a tool at the YWCA called the Self-Sufficiency Calculator, designed by the University of Washington to really determine what you need to earn to actually be considered self-sufficient. Now, we know it's not an either or, it's more of a continuum, and this tool is an aspirational tool, but what it tells us is that for a single parent of 2 children, they would need to earn $34 an hour to be considered self-sufficient in Seattle. And we know that a lot of the folks working, living in Seattle do not make that. And so it can be a little bit depressing, but again, we're helping people with career pathways, and so incremental steps towards that goal. And it's important to know what we're dealing with, what it actually costs to live and to live well in the city.
But can you, one of you elaborate on that a little more? Because one of the things I was surprised by today, I was in the GSBA's policy council meeting today and learned that Seattle has, well, technically the second highest sales tax rate in the country, with Tacoma being the first. And I was really curious around how does, I mean, I know we don't have income tax here in Washington State, but how does such a high sales tax impact that number? Because I figure that it has to, but if you're paying a really high sales tax and property tax when you're trying to make a decent wage, does it just kind of take it back down to what it really is?
Well, yeah, I think user taxes are not to get too political here, I think they're a little bit inherently unfair. And I will point out, Washington is one of the few states that doesn't have both a sales tax and an income tax. And Oregon's also another one of those states. Oregon's never going to have a sales tax. And I don't think Washington's ever going to have an income tax. So I think basically, if you really want to get income equality, I would say you need a three-legged stool, as economists say. You need both a sales tax and an income tax. Obviously, if that happened here, the income tax would replace some of the sales tax and it would go down. But we were talking beforehand, food costs are so high. Every time you go to the grocery store, every time you want to go to the east side, you're paying for that road. And I think that creates inequities. I think an income tax would be inherently more fair.
Any thoughts, Aparna?
Well, I'm not an economist, right? So I can't weigh in on whether we should or should not have what kinds of taxes. But as somebody who's lived in Washington at two really different income levels in my life, you know, when I first moved here, I work for Neighborhood House, which is similar to the YWCA. It's a large community-based organization, and definitely lived at or around the poverty level, and have skipped a couple of levels since then. And I live on the east side, where you pay, you know, $10 to cross the bridge, which is kind of ridiculous. And one of the things that I feel like there's a miss on in the conversations that we're having is we talk about like income taxes and sales taxes, and we forget that the people that are the most impacted, they're not speaking economics. They're not speaking economics, and we'll use figures like, you know, 5%, 10%. Inflation is one that we've been talking about a lot for the last couple of years. Well, yeah, sure, the inflation is 7%, but if the majority of your spending is on food and transportation, and that has actually doubled, then you're experiencing like 100% inflation. You're not experiencing 7% inflation because you're not buying a washing machine for which, or a car that is, right, like that there is a 7% increase. You're buying eggs that are now like $7 a dozen, and literally like people just need to be given a chicken at this point. Like, you should just get eggs in your house, right? And I'm being a little bit facetious, but like that's pricey. That's pricey, and a lot of the people who are at that income level are not actually here. They're not here.
And we don't see that the government benefit programs actually catching up to match that inflationary increase. Food stamps, folks are getting the same benefit. They got a little bit more during the pandemic. Those pandemic benefits are now expiring. The latest to expire is the child care subsidy. Yes. That impacts families incredibly. You add that into the budget. You consider that folks are paying more than 50% of their income towards rent, which is considered severely rent burdened. And then you add in the food costs on top. There's just no money left over that families have currently. It's a real challenge.
So then here comes the fun follow-up question. Is affordability enough of a priority here?
Well, it is.
You gotta have a fun question. Come on.
Something I just heard. It is so incredibly expensive here. There's a company in the southeastern United States that has numerous branch offices all over the country, including here in Seattle. It's a small business. It's a startup business. They are very close to saying we are not going to open up any more Seattle markets because it's just too expensive to pay people here. And the real estate costs are too expensive. And if you compare where the companies has offices in places like South Carolina or Georgia or Tennessee, the salaries that they have to pay here to attract talent, which is the number one thing that I hear from business people over decades as a journalist, is we need to be able to attract talent, and it's just getting too expensive for this company to attract talent here, so they're thinking about shutting down the West Coast, and by that I mean Oregon, Washington, and California, because it's simply too expensive to do business here.
Well, okay, so I think like too expensive is relative, like in every facet of our life. And at the end of the day, like our city and our region and our businesses that are anchored here are not interested in affordability. Like they're not making the choices that makes Seattle and like the Pacific Northwest in general affordable, because at the end of the day, like what's going to create affordability? Like what is affordability, right? Either you get paid more or things cost less. And the reality is like it's somewhere in the middle. Like you get paid more and things cost less. And so, I mean, what efforts are we making to get there? We're not, right? Like we're actually creating these zones of like incredible privilege, right? Like Seattle is one of the most segregated cities in the country. It has some of the widest opportunity and education gaps between white and Black kids, right? Here.
Yeah, we
Here.
talked about that in June.
Yeah. And why is that? We have Amazon and Microsoft and Boeing here. So there is an enormous amount of wealth here. There is an enormous amount of like potential opportunity here, and we're not even investing in our kids. You know, Seattle has like the highest per capita private schools in the country, more than New York City. Why are we not trusting in building even an education system where our kids are all going to learn together?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the gentrification and displacement that we're seeing, it's off the charts. The populations the YWCA serves are being forced further and further south to find affordability. It makes me think of Seattle like a resort town where folks come to work and then go back to live where they can afford to live, where unfortunately there aren't as many services to support them and their families. So we're experiencing a crisis that businesses are not drawn, but people themselves are pushed out. It is creating a rich enclave, and neighborhoods are changing, communities are changing, and we're not seeing some of the public policy decisions around multifamily zoning or set-asides in new apartments, that even some place like Portland has, where there's requirements to build affordable housing into your new housing units. So I can't say that it's a priority. If it were a priority, we would be working upstream, starting with youth, connecting them to more educational opportunities. Look at the tech sector. Yet we're drawing the talent from out of our state. We're drawing the talent from other places. YWCA has a program called Fem to STEM that was designed to work upstream, work with young women and girls of color to connect them to tech internships and tech programs. But there's all too few of those initiatives. And it feels like if we did make it a priority, then there would be amazing public-private partnerships, because the private wealth, the public funding would come together in a unified approach. We just don't have that currently. Now there are initiatives and obviously some government sponsored programs and partnerships that are starting to change that, but it feels like it's quite after the fact, and a lot of our responses are reactive rather than proactive.
And now you've just segued into some of what I want to talk to you about specifically and have everyone else weigh in on. So when we talk about career training, I don't want to say job training, but when we talk about career training, I think one of the things that stood out to me during my time at YWCA was expanding how I thought about what that means. Meaning that, I think growing up in Detroit, we work blue collar. You get a job that keeps you going with the union. You're good and you go. And you only went to a career training when you're like in high school or coming out of high school. But now this is across the board. This is just about any age, any part of your life, and people starting to do that. And I remember when we had the mayor here in May, and we were talking about that, and there were so many people in the audience that were just talking about how they're trying to afford to stay in the places that they've lived in for 20, 30 years, which really was the inspiration for this conversation tonight. So one of the things I learned at YW was seeing the different people that were coming to those career trainings. And my favorite was BankWorks.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to talk about BankWorks for a little bit, especially the graduation part of it. And I think I was drawn to BankWorks because I came from banking. But also I loved going to the graduations because every person that's getting their certificate would get this kind of 30-second spiel said about them. It was like the awards. And every time I left graduation, I felt less educated as a person because people that were coming in were either from other countries with advanced degrees, people who were restarting their careers because they were military or a spouse of military. And I think we don't talk about those subset of people that are trying to obtain these jobs or restart with these. It's always something more derogatory. So can you talk about, and it's such a positive experience, so can you talk more about those types of programs and who you're seeing coming through those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, because I think BankWorks is an example of a public-private partnership that I would like to say we need more of, and not just patting ourselves on the back. I think it's a model. It's a model that's across the country in 13 different states, so it's not just us. But it is such a unique program when you think about the challenges that the people we serve face. And the people we serve are low-income, BIPOC, residents of the community, often immigrants, refugees, women who are recovering from domestic violence or from abuse, and young folks who are also just starting their careers. And they often don't have the time to go back to college to get a 4-year degree. Most of them do not have a 4-year degree. They need to get something that will launch them into a middle wage job relatively quickly to be able to afford to live here. And so short-term vocational programs that are, really engaged partnerships with employers who ultimately will hire the graduates of the program is one model of a way to quickly and rapidly train somebody with industry informing the curriculum, participating in the class and the program, and at graduation, directly hiring our participants and also providing pathways to advancement and career progression. And so when we were talking about the BankWorks program, we were the second city outside of Los Angeles where they brought the program in 2011. We knew that our folks that we serve have amazing skills in customer service, amazing people skills. They're also really good with money. They're able to stretch a dollar because they didn't have very much, and they used what they had to cover their expenses. They're empathetic. They have amazing, people skills. So we saw all of this, and then we saw banking, and we saw who was working in banking, typically white men, a lot of white women at that point as well, and a lot of folks with 4-year degrees that you didn't necessarily need for a banking career. So we saw an opportunity there. We also saw a desire among the people we serve to work in, a white-collar profession where they could, feel like, be very professional, have interactions that felt really good, that felt positive around managing money and finances. It was a natural fit for us to want to take this program. And this program, the BankWorks program, it's an 8-week training. The curriculum was created in partnership with the banks and credit unions in our community who also fund the program. There's 26 of them now. They fund the program. We were able to bring in public funding as well because public funding always wants to see private dollars, and they love that concept of matching the funds. And then, everybody has skin in the game, right? If the banks are paying for it, they're investing in the participants, in the graduates. Therefore, they're invested in making sure that they're successful. They come to our classes, they co-teach the curriculum. We talk about sales, customer service, relationship management, banking products, federal regulations. All these things are co-taught. And it culminates in the graduation, which you mentioned, which is this inspirational event where each student gets spotlighted. They get their turn to shine. There's a bio that we read. We talk about all of the amazing skills that they bring, the wonderful strengths they have. And it immediately, switches to a hiring event where they interview with each of our bank and credit unions partners. They get job offers right then and there. It's an amazing thing to see. It's got an 80% job placement rate. We've placed nearly 800 people since 2011. And I would say about, when we looked at it, over a quarter were promoted within their first year. So we really do see this as an example of a rapid way to train, place people in jobs that lead to good wages that will be self-sufficient and that, you know, can be reproduced and scaled up very easily. And it was so successful, we created the Pharmacy Works program, the CareerWorks Medical program. We've been able to expand the model to other industries.
Aparna, I want to ask you, I love doing this there. But I think coming off of the public-private partnership conversation, you know, what role do you believe that companies play or should be playing in creating those kind of partnerships and thus contributing to affordability?
Yeah, what roles should companies play? So, I mean, I think before I talk about that, I do want to say something that I think personally is really important, which is what job is deserving of poverty level wages? What's the job that a human person does in our world that's deserving of poverty level wages? Right? And so the concept of jobs that help you move into, you know, middle class life, okay, well, great. Like, I think all jobs should afford you the basics, like rent. Like, you shouldn't be paying more than half of your take-home pay on rent, for instance. So that's like one point of contention for me when people start talking about job training and, you know, getting people like skilled up for higher wage jobs. Like, we don't need a city full of only engineers. We have that, and we are living with the impact of it. They're not civically engaged, you know, like they're not like in the community. They're not part of organizations. And I'm not even from Seattle, but I've noticed that like over the last 15 years, there's less and less engagement, especially from people that are coming here, using it as a resort city and then going elsewhere, right? Like they don't have a horse in the race. And so public-private partnerships, well, I would say like corporations actually just need to pay fairer wages across the board. Like, we can't have a scenario in which companies are making record profits. And I know that that's not everybody. Like, I know that it's not like all of the restaurants in the ID, of course. Like, they're not making tons of money. But there are so many companies in Seattle, so many founders that are making so much, and they are siphoning, right? They're extracting from labor and giving it to shareholders. Now, if you're an engineer who works at Amazon, great, because like you get to have a piece of that pie for now. But if you are the majority of Amazon workers who are in delivery or warehousing, then what, right? Like, you're making $20 an hour. Same with Starbucks, right? Like, if you're working in corporate, you get to have a piece of that extraction via the shares that you're given. But what about the baristas? What about those folks? And so when I think about public-private partnerships, I'm just like, like, hire people that are already skilled, right? Like, the business of not taking people, and I think you see this a lot at the YW, where somebody is going to have like an accounting degree from Egypt, but their degree doesn't count in the United States. Their degree doesn't count in the United States. My parents immigrated to the US a little over 20 years ago, and my mom actually had to go back and get a degree, even though she had 2 degrees already, because her degree didn't count, right? And she has worked in low-wage jobs ever since, 20 years, being a highly educated person. So pay more and pay more fairly. And also, like, be part of passing progressive policies. I feel like one of the things that I've seen more and more aggressively is our region's chamber is not pro-worker. They are not pro-worker. They are super pro-business, and they try and squash every effort to pass any progressive legislation, right? And we need it. We need it because the people that are in these $20 an hour jobs, which by the way, like, is only in our region, right? It's like literally only in Seattle. It's not out in Bellingham or on the peninsula. They're making like 15 bucks an hour. They're not going to be at these kinds of forums. They're not going door knocking. They're not collecting signatures because they can't, because they're working too damn much. So I think businesses need to step up.
Rob, what are you seeing on the Seattle Business Magazine side? Of any stories that you're hearing about employers and job market, the dipping, as you know, we turn around and every time there's, you know, T-Mobile's laying off people. You know, all these high jobs that people were saying, to your point, oh, you need to be an engineer, you need to be this and this and that, but then those are the roles that are starting to disappear. And I think that's the other question around, okay, if you're saying we need to make this much, but the jobs we're being told make that much are not necessarily stable, kind of what are you seeing and reading from the magazine perspective?
I want to share a conversation I had recently with a business executive. Oh, and by the way, shameless plug, Seattle Magazine just did a story on the BankWorks program, and I love what you guys are doing. So I had a conversation with an executive at Filson, the clothing manufacturer, and this was probably a couple of years ago now. And they and especially a lot of other manufacturing companies are having trouble getting workers. And he was telling me that they, you know, if you get into a training program with them, or like an apprenticeship program, within 2 to 3 years, you could be making, I mean, if you're successful at it, you could be making $75,000 a year, which then leads to a question that why aren't more people taking advantage of this program? So after I talked with this person, I asked one of the executives at Seattle colleges, you know, you have Boeing and Amazon and Microsoft and all these companies who are really investing, along with Seattle colleges, into these workforce training and workforce development programs. And I thought this answer is one I hadn't thought of. She says, you can't tell a 19-year-old that they can't major in philosophy. Not every 19-year-old is going to be thinking about what they want to do in the future, or 22-year-old or whatever. They're doing what they want to do at the time, and as a result, a lot of these jobs go unfilled. I'm not sure there's an answer there, but it's a frustration that's shared, you know, on the macro level at every level of business. And I was supposed to moderate this. I can't help myself. I wanted to ask you a question. Are your programs full? How do people find out about these?
That was going to be my next question.
Oh, sorry.
No, but I like it though. Go.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, just to kind of echo some of your points, I think if you add up what costs the turnover and retention challenges businesses face due to challenges keeping workers, you would see that if they paid higher wages, provided more a career map of advancement within house, and made work like also more flexible and offered more benefits to actually folks so their families can be okay, it would be good business sense. So I just want to echo from a business perspective. You know, as far as our programs, we don't turn anybody away. There's vast need out there, but we expand to meet the need. We go after the funding. We have a great team. Alicia was one of folks who raise funds so that we can do what we do. And, you know, we're very fortunate to some of those big companies that do fund our programs and that do contribute major dollars. They're all on our board, Amazon, Microsoft. We get, you know, laptops from Amazon. We get lots of tech funding from Microsoft. Alaska Airlines hosts our young interns who are interested in aviation. So I do want to point out that businesses are contributing, but what we need is a real change in the ecosystem. And as far as folks hearing about our programs and coming to us, you know, these days and during the pandemic, we didn't really have to go out to find folks. They found their way to us because there was a level of desperation. And I think that continues even as the job market has rebounded and then some, and as we see some of the wages rise, we're seeing just so much hardship because of the continuing challenges that pre-existed the pandemic that had to do with income inequality and wage stagnation, which we're talking about.
Can I just also say that a lot of organizations like the YW have people that are in the community,
Yes.
right? It's not like you're like, I'm launching a new program, trust the internet, right? Like you also have people that are in the
Our
community.
staff are multilingual, they're embedded in the community, they reflect the community, we hire from the community. So many of our staff were on the receiving end of our services or themselves paycheck to paycheck, struggling. 60% of our staff are BIPOC. Within that, 40% are African American. We have folks, and we have recently, had challenges ourselves paying what we consider a living wage. We made a significant investment in increasing the wage for our staff because we saw that continuing challenge our folks would face. But absolutely, they're trusted, credible messengers in the community, and they're really adept at connecting and building relationships, and really and also being able to see the dependable strengths that people have that they may not see within themselves. So, we're partnering with housing authorities, community colleges, libraries, schools. We're out there working with DSHS community service offices where people get food stamps, TANF, other benefits. We're at the food banks. We use social media. We use our website. We try to break down barriers and go to where people are, to the community centers, to the locations where they live. And that has never been a challenge for us because it's just what we do, and it comes naturally to us. And I have to say, as a white male, most of the folks who work under our programs are not like me. And I, strive to go out of my way to make sure that my replacement is not going to look like me, is going to reflect that community. And fortunately, I think there are fewer like me in this field, but I think there is a role for all of us. And I have to acknowledge my privilege and understand that my background is not the background of the people we serve. But I have to listen a lot and really go out of my way to understand the path that people have walked. And I think it comes naturally to a lot of our staff who do that.
I don't even know how to ask this, but I think about where I live. Like, I live in Edmonds, and there's a lot of people that live here and in other communities. I wonder, and maybe I start with Mike on this one, is how do you attract people or convince some folks to come into these programs that may feel otherwise stigmatized? And what I mean by that is that, unfortunately, there is narratives out there where someone will say, oh, you can't afford to live here? Well, if you worked harder, you could afford to live here. And that usually is being said to someone that's the barista or someone that's cleaning that house. But then they have to travel further south or further north to get to the place where they can afford to. So I think there are times where people that are in those jobs almost feel stigmatized to not seek that out.
Right.
And I have to imagine that happens with you at times. And I just want to really co-sign something about Mike. When I first started working with him, I was like, what is this white dude doing with all these people? But you've been doing this for over 20 years. And just the most genuine person in this role that I've ever seen. So I just wanted to give that up to you. But with that, how do you and your staff and others, and you guys chime in as well, is how do you talk to those folks in those roles that feel like, hey, I want to do something different, or I want to figure out a way to make more money, but then you have a certain contingent of people that look or treat you a certain way because you're in service industry or something.
Yeah.
And does that carry in through their trainings that you have to kind of mentally help them get out of?
Well, there's a lot. I think there's some really damaging narratives in America. The bootstrap narrative of if you work hard, you can make it here, which has gotten more and more distant for the people we serve. You put on top of that systemic racism embedded deeply in our systems, the challenges within our educational system, challenges the history of redlining and of really, really punitive and horribly racist policies in this country that continue to this day. When you see the wealth differential between black families and white families, and then you see how people who live here have been treated by systems, by government systems, by even the nonprofit sector, which, we have a stake in continuing poverty ourselves because it keeps us in business. And sometimes that manifests in our system as well. And we also can work within a white supremacist kind of system where we may be seen as not the people who can really understand or empathize with what somebody's gone through. So I think the first thing is to consider to build programs with a trauma-informed care and racial equity-informed design, to understand that our programs need to be designed with the voices of the people we serve at the center. We need to do a lot of listening, deep listening. We need to be at those community roundtables where we're hearing people talk about their challenges, where we are, being more reflective and really just learning, because we have a ton to learn from the people we serve. I think it starts with that. I think it starts with that relationship building where we can also point to stories of people who've come before. We have something called opportunity circles for immigrants and refugees, and we do them in, we have a Vietnamese, we have a Somali, and we bring families who've come here years ago with newer families who've arrived here so they can hear about that narrative of the family who's struggled but has overcome some of those challenges. We really do rely on mentorship, peer support. We take a cohort approach where we work with folks and we help to connect them with each other so they can learn from each other. I think taking that community approach has been kind of our secret sauce, so to speak, in how we build trust within the community, break down some of the barriers, and help people to understand that we can be part of the solution, not part of the continuing problem. I think it's just deep relationship work that's taken us, and we've been around since 1890 in this community. We were the first integrated YWCA over at our Phyllis Wheatley branch in East Cherry. We've always centered African American women and lifted the voices of African American women, which the data tells us is the population furthest from opportunity. So we have that history, but we can't get lazy about it. We have to keep working and building those strong relationships, and also using data to show that our programs can be successful, using stories, quantitative data, qualitative data, connecting with folks, continuing to engage with folks after they exit our programs, after they get a job, helping them continue, because folks, it's not a smooth path always. There's going to be setbacks. So it's deep relationship work. It's deeply engaged in the community work, and it starts from who we hire, and it goes all the way to the CEO of our organization, our first woman of color, Maria Chavez Wilcox, who kind of can set the tone, diversifying our board, increasing client advisory levels on every level of our organization, having them join our interviews when we're interviewing staff, building programs through design sessions. All of this, we're doing it. We have a national fund grant to identify challenges with folks accessing services through all the paperwork they have to complete, sharing their story, which can be traumatizing. So we're constantly looking at how we can break down barriers to ease the path for folks.
No, thanks for that. So, right?
Yeah. Yes.
The man knows what he's doing. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you asked the question about how do we reduce stigma around some of these jobs, these careers, and you said, how do we convince people to go into a line of work that is being stigmatized, right? And I would say the answer, so incredible, right? Like we're in relationship, but I think that the being in relationship also flows when we're with each other and we're noticing that behavior with our peers, because who's doing the stigmatizing? Who's doing the stigmatizing? We're doing the stigmatizing, right? Like we've made it bad to be poor, which as somebody who has been poor, nobody wants to be poor. Nobody who's poor wants to be poor. Like maybe like a white guy with very wealthy parents wants to experience, wants to, yeah, right? Like that's like nobody who's actually poor wants to be poor. And so we have to be in relationship with people and have conversations when they are doing, right? Like when you're given the dirty look to a construction worker who's walked in a restaurant, like we want the buildings, but we don't want them being in places and spaces with us, right? Like we want to go and have a really great shopping experience, and we want to stigmatize the person. Like we want to stigmatize the retail associate who's making $15 an hour and probably is it's one of her 2 or 3 jobs. And so that work of being in deep relationship has to flow with our peers so that we start to put an end to the conversations where we're making being poor, being a person of color, having a certain kind of job bad. Because at the end of the day, I want the food that's being cooked by the folks here, right? I actually want it. But I think that that's a dirty job, I want the trash picked up off of my street, which 100% I do, because I grew up in India where that doesn't happen. Right, but I'm gonna make the trash guy be that's not a dirty job, that's an essential job. So offer dignity. Like, we literally need all of the people that make our world work.
I think for a while, especially during the pandemic, that we valued more than usual the essential employee, and the ones that you've already named, in a way.
But then we moved on. Right?
Then we moved on.
But
Yeah.
then we moved on, and we just had the Labor Day weekend where all of the labor was laboring, and the rest of us were at our respective cabins enjoying, summer.
Right. I want to continue this, but I can't. But thank you. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much. And then we're going to come back with Beth Knox and talk major sports in Seattle. So don't go far away. Okay, everybody, welcome back. We're here now for our second conversation. I'm Alicia Crank, and I am with the amazing Beth Knox from the Seattle Sports Commission. Hi, Beth.
Hello there.
So I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So full disclosure, I am a commissioner. I'm still figuring out what that means, but it's so fun. But Beth, let's talk about what is it? That's the question I get from most people. They're like, what is the Seattle Sports Commission?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because a lot of people do wonder, what is the whole point of a sports commission? But just like a chamber of commerce has members, or we have cooler names, we have commissioners, but we are advocating on behalf of the sports community. We have two primary purposes. One is to provide support to all of our professional teams and our university athletic departments. And the second is to bid on premier sporting events that we can bring to the greater Seattle region. So you likely heard about the MLB All-Star Game that was just here, and prior to that was the NCAA Women's Basketball Super Regionals, which was an awesome event. So that's what we focus on, is both economic as well as cultural impact that these events can bring to the region.
So who are the commissioners? Like, what is the makeup of the commissioners that are on this commission? Because I think most people would think, oh, it's all sports people. It's like, no, not so much.
No, it's people like yourself, of course, but we have about 150 members, and it's a combination of representatives from our professional sports teams. All of them are represented, our universities, but also municipalities. So like the City of Federal Way, City of Auburn, City of Tukwila, and you think about the venues that they have in those locations. City of Federal Way has the King County Aquatic Center, where we can bring championship swim and dive events to their facility. So we are very cognizant of those kinds of members that are looking for the impact of sports in their own city. And then we have nonprofit community groups, such as City Club, but also Seafair, Special Olympics Washington. And then the last group would be, it's our corporate partners. It's the companies that typically have a connection in some way to the sports community. So they might be a sponsor of a professional sports team or one of our facilities, but they want to stay integrated into the sports community. Could also be a supplier, like All City Fence or Staff Pro that has security that works at these events. And they all have connections, and they want to work together to collaborate and ensure that we are maintaining a healthy and vibrant sports community here.
So let's talk about All-Star Week, because that was amazing. That was my kind of first official outing as a commissioner, engaging in a week long of activity. And what I would say was what was really interesting for me was coming to the pre-meetings, right? And you're learning about all the different partners and all the different community groups that were being reached out to, seeing police and fire there to represent and visit Seattle, and talking about, bicycles and green pathways. What was that like for you? Like, that seemed like is that the biggest production of an event that you've been able to bring to Seattle?
Well, it's I will say, the first event that Seattle has hosted, a premier sporting event in 20 years, and certainly since an MLB All-Star Game has been here. The most recent one that I would maybe put in that category is the Special Olympics USA Games that were here in 2018, but those primarily took place on the University of Washington campus. It was a big impact, but it wasn't citywide like an MLB All-Star, which is really more regional in many ways. So, what was it like for me? Frankly, it's my sweet spot, and that is being a convener, bringing people together. In theory, the Mariners could have taken on their roles of executing with MLB the ball games, and a lot of those things could have happened independently without us, but by us being involved, we brought together Visit Seattle, the mayor's office, a number of other organizations that were able to be invested in the planning process. We connected with the neighborhoods to make sure that people were informed about what was coming, and then encouraged activations. So, it really is a chance when these big events come. It's an opportunity to really foster that collaboration. I saw it as a tipping point that the city was ready for, our region was ready for, to say, okay, we are on this side of the pandemic, and we know we have recovery to do. We know we have work to do to get our city clean and welcoming and safe and all of those things. And having a premier event like the All-Star Game was the perfect leverage, the perfect target for us to say, okay, we have to have the city clean by this date. Here's your marker. And I'm really proud of how the city departments and the regional agencies responded to that. Of course, there were a few that were in the beginning like, oh, we've got lots of time, and then they were, holy shit, it's coming. It's like right here. But the vast majority of them were excited to have a reason to step up their game and implement some things that would help to transform the city. So ultimately, we didn't have any incidences. I was really proud of that. Things worked very smoothly. Of course, there's lots of learnings that we took away from that event, and now we'll apply it to future events that we hope to bring, and we will be bringing.
Now, I'm hoping you can also talk a little bit about kind of the community activation or activities that happened. There was so much that was going on. Even, I think, MLB rehabbed a few baseball fields or things like that. And also, too, I would like to know, how is it having an inaugural event kick off here as part of MLB, which was the HBCU Swingman Classic?
Yeah. That was great. So I'll talk to that one second. But the community activations, the Mariners and the Sports Commission and the Mayor's Office in particular, and even Visit Seattle, we all had a real commitment to making the event be as accessible as possible. I think we all are aware that a ticket to go to the Home Run Derby or the All-Star Game is not accessible to a lot of people. They're expensive tickets, and it can prevent people from being able to participate in those events. So we really focused on, in addition, what other things could we offer? Certainly FanFest, that was a much more affordable option to get that baseball experience. That was at Lumen Field. And those tickets were between $10 and $35, so a much more affordable rate. But then we wanted to have free events as well. And a lot of the communities really stepped up to create their own activations. So down on the waterfront on Pier 62, they had a number of activations there. Pioneer Square, they brought in a roller rink, and they had music, and there was a baseball-themed art exhibit in what is now called Railroad Spur. Am I saying that right, Rob? Rail Spur, thank you. Rail Spur. So there were a lot of really accessible, very cool things. Uwajimaya and a number of areas in the Chinatown International District had activations. Soto also did. And then you had Seattle Center that Space Needle put on a phenomenal drone show that was a lighted drone show, and that was free to the public. So the idea was to create opportunities for people to feel like they were experiencing the All-Star Game in some way, whether or not they had a ticket to T-Mobile Park for Home Run Derby or the All-Star Game. But to your point, the inaugural event of the HBCU Swingman Classic, which was on Friday night of All-Star Weekend, this was sponsored by, endorsed by Ken Griffey Jr. He was the one who really brought it to MLB, and Seattle was the first to host this at an All-Star game. And, it was $10 tickets, so super affordable. And it was an extraordinary experience for me to be part of that, to be just walking around the ballpark, and seeing so many individuals from all of our communities, but seeing so many people of color that it was joyful. It was absolutely joyful. And the takeaway that I heard over and over is, let's continue to do a version of this in Seattle. We don't need an all-star game to keep doing this. So I hope that we'll work with the Mariners and see if that's feasible. But it was truly an extraordinary thing for Seattle to have the first hosting rights to that event.
Well, I know that there are members of Black Sports Professional Seattle in the room, so you got our call. We know what we want to do. So again, the overarching theme for everything is affordability, and we know that that is relative depending on who you are. The Sports Commission is about building a world-class sports market. Just coming off a discussion we had about jobs and affordability, the Sports Business Journal earlier this year ranked Seattle at number 20 on their list, with one of the ranking criteria being that it had to be affordable to visit and or live in that particular city. What other factors came into play with it being ranked number 20?
Well, my colleague Rob Leslie is here, and when we read that article, of course we were like, what the heck, why are we 20? Why are we ranked at only 20? And so it got us asking that question, okay, what goes into making this decision of the ranking? And because it doesn't explain that, it just says, here's the list of where cities land. And so we reached out to the Sports Business Journal and the authors. There were two co-authors, and asked if they would share their findings and the criteria behind the ranking. So one of the co-authors did, he zoomed in and presented to our commissioners at one of our quarterly meetings. And what we found is, I think it's relevant to emphasize that this was best sports city business, the best city to do sports business, which is a very specific category. So yes, certainly affordability was one of them. Other categories that they referenced, it was the full gamut of number of corporations who are a sponsor of multiple sports teams and facilities. So not just one sponsorship, but multiple. So that was a factor. It's also things like, are we hosting events that are like an MLB All-Star? We actually got more points, if you will, because of the hosting that we've done with the NCAA events, the championship events. So that actually put us up a little higher, and we're going to continue to bid on those types of events. But it's also about what else can a city offer to visitors who are coming and businesses that want to participate in our events. So are there the other elements that when a fan comes to a city, are there attractions, entertainment? If they can't get a hotel in downtown Seattle, where is the next option outside the area, immediate downtown? So, we learned a lot from that discussion, and, they talked a lot about Dallas and Houston and, where their government funds the majority of their sporting events. And so, but we also said, Seattle doesn't want to be Texas. We don't want to be one of those cities. And we do have, right?
Clap for that.
So we want to focus on the unique qualities that our city and our region brings to these events, and we can do better, right? We can still focus on improvements. Now, I'm not going to be able to lower hotel rates. I wish. So that's where it goes back to what can we impact. And so when I'm selling our city to a league or a conference and trying to attract one of their events to us, we focus on the other elements, like the walkable downtown. That was a huge factor for MLB All-Star, having the easy proximity between T-Mobile Park and Lumen Field. That was just a really attractive element. And then accessibility to the waterfront, accessibility to visit other attractions in the area, whether it's the Woodinville wineries or Mount Rainier. So we try to emphasize the things that are real selling points of Seattle. And but it is a factor that our hotel rates or the convention center, that those rates are very high. And it makes it really tough for us to compete with a Fargo or some of these other more remote cities that can say, and we're going to give you the convention center for free. We can't do that. So we have to find other ways that we can, other offerings that we can put on the table.
We will be taking questions for Beth as well. So same setup. If you want to ask her a question, just line up by the microphones there. So after all of that, how did you feel about the ranking once the explanation from the writers were given? And did you see any areas that could potentially be improved upon in the immediate within the community that was addressed?
Well, yes. I mean, again, in that particular category, I can't impact corporations that are sponsoring businesses here. Now, we can play a small role. We are often encouraging our members or our corporate partners to invest in our professional teams and or have a suite at our venues. So we have some influence in that area, but my takeaway was that particular ranking, because again, it was about sports business, where do we rank for fans wanting to come to Seattle on that tourism side? So I'm waiting for that ranking to come out because I think that's where we can focus our efforts. And part of that is how can we be a more inclusive and welcoming city to those fans? How can we be inclusive of our own residents who live here locally and want to attend these events? That's more important to me than where we rank as a sports business city.
I love that answer. So speaking of inclusivity, tell us about the foundation.
Yes, so the Sports Commission has a foundation that focuses on breaking down barriers and creating more equitable access to youth sports. Now, we made the decision that our foundation would not be executing on these events because there are a number of organizations in this region who are experts at that. We are not. But we have a great platform and a great membership base of commissioners who care about that and want to support it. So we focus on the fundraising side of it so that we can support capacity building and assist in getting more access for more kids to participate in youth sports. So we work closely with the King County Play Equity Coalition, for example. They're a great organization that has a number of youth sports organizations and community leaders who are doing that hard work. They have the data that can speak directly to the communities in the areas where there's the most need, and that they can get the dollars and the activities to the kids in need. So that's what our foundation focuses on, and we work hard to make sure that we are working with good partners who are doing that great work.
I think we have a question.
How do you see women's soccer and the Oil Reigns like trajectory? Do you see challenges for them in Seattle, or do you see them kind of pulling in this ecosystem of energy around them? And what other kind of horizons do you see for women's sports in Seattle?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think that we are in a phenomenal region to support women's sports. And between the Storm and the OL Reign, there is a lot of great energy around that. I think the OL Reign, I think the answer is yes to both. They are on a trajectory and they've got great momentum. Their attendance numbers keeps increasing. I remember that first game, and there were, I think they had like 7,500 that first game, and now they're easily in the 10 to 12,000 on a pretty regular basis. And for Megan Rapinoe's final game, which I hope you all buy tickets for, it's October 6th. They are likely going to sell out the lower bowl, which will be over 30,000. So. And I think they will continue to face challenges. I mean, that's unfortunate, but getting that type of support that they need it's just an ongoing challenge and an effort that is required. Now, I will give a shout out to Lumen Field. They have just been incredibly supportive of the OL Reign and pushing to give them the visibility and making it feasible for them to play in a facility like Lumen Field. So I love that they have continued to grow, but they're going to continue to need our support. And we can't take that for granted. To have an NWSL team in our city and to have the opportunity for young girls to get to experience, witness these kinds of talented players right here in our hometown. When they were in Tacoma, we didn't have that easy access to them. And so I hope that that reminded us to not take them for granted, but they're going to continue to need our support.
That was a great question. Thank you. We have another one.
Hi, thanks for being here. On the soccer train, on that theme, I wanted to ask about the World Cup coming to Seattle in, I think, about four years or less. Just can you tell us about what the bid process was like and what impact do you think FIFA will have on Seattle?
Yes, it's very exciting. 3 years out. Not that I'm counting. Yeah, that clock is ticking for me. But yeah, the bid process started actually before I was involved with the Sports Commission. It started in 2017, and which is amazing when you think about that lead up. So I came into the Sports Commission in 2020, and we were still in the bid process because while the bid had been submitted, there was a tremendous amount of supplemental materials that had to be submitted over the next 2 years. So through 2020 and 2021, we were constantly providing those additional materials. A great example is their requirements around human rights. And it wasn't, you didn't just submit, here's how we feel about human rights. We conducted a number of focus groups led by Professor Anita Ramasastry at University of Washington, who is an attorney, and she sits on the UN Commission for Human Rights. So kind of an expert there. She's truly amazing. So she really led the efforts. We commissioned her to do that and conducted the focus groups. We got feedback, we got guidance from all of the different stakeholders in the human rights community, and then submitted a thorough report on that. So, and P.S., we were told that Seattle ranked the highest out of all of the bid submissions for human rights and sustainability, actually. But those were the kinds of things that we did in 2020 and 2021, and then it was June of 2021 when we were finally told the host cities. So just a reminder that this was a united bid, so it's North America, Canada, US, and Mexico. There are 11 host cities that were awarded the opportunity to host the World Cup in the U.S. So 11 in the U.S., 3 in Canada, and 2 in Mexico. So a total of 16, and each of the host cities will be given a certain number of matches. And in Seattle's case, we're likely to get between 3 and 7 matches. We're about a month away, give or take, of hearing exactly how many matches we will have. And we've been lobbying. I don't know how effective, there were no bribes, I promise. But we've been lobbying for a quarterfinal. So we'll see if that happens. I'm hopeful. But that what it'll mean for our city is, it's going to be a 30 to 45 days of an influx of visitors like we have never seen, of activations like we have never seen here. MLB All-Star was the biggest that we've had in certainly ever really, in our history here. And World Cup will exceed it beyond any expectation. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's very daunting at the same time. I was just at a meeting with Chief Diaz from SPD, and he is very aware of the requirement of police staffing, and we all know that there's already a shortage, let alone with the World Cup. So he's doing a lot of hard work now with King County Sheriff's Department, with Washington State Patrol, with some of the other municipalities to where there can be a mutual aid call for support. But that's, to me, it's also the exciting opportunity. I mean, of course, it's beyond amazing to have this opportunity to host the World Cup, but what it will take to host it will require immense collaboration, and only good can come from that. I will tell you that Mayor Harrell thinks very big, and he is saying, okay, so the last really, really big event that Seattle had was the World's Fair in 1962, and we got a Space Needle out of it. So what's the next Space Needle? Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to get another structure, but what's the next big idea? And
he's get a spear like they have in Vegas and make it.
It could be, but it could also be, it's something that we haven't even contemplated yet. So I love that our city leaders are as invested in this. They understand that Seattle's going to be on the global stage, and that we can generate some really amazing legacy components that we want our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren to look back and say, that was pretty amazing what happened in 2026.
Crazy. Like, we had time for 2 more. So, Bianca?
Hello, how are you? So kind of straying from the soccer scene, with the Climate Pledge already hosting, the Kraken coming up on their third season, and then we have obviously the Amazing Storm. Do we see the NBA returning back to Seattle? I had to ask for the basketball fans.
I knew that question was coming. I knew it was coming.
I had to ask.
I do see it. I see it. No, I think that, and I know that Todd and Tim Lywicki of the Kraken and Climate Pledge Arena will say this as well, that we are fully prepared. We have a world-class arena that has already been built. The locker rooms are all ready, just sitting there waiting for an NBA team to come to it. Not only the existence of the Seattle Center, but now with Memorial Stadium being renovated, that campus is going to be extraordinary. There is so much in place for an NBA team. There's no question that the NBA is really aware of the community support for a team. And so now we just have to be patient and wait for those stars align when the commissioner of the NBA says, this is the right moment. We believe that Seattle is perfectly positioned for that moment. So it's just being patient. I think it'll happen. I just don't know when.
It's coming. I agree.
It's coming.
And Angie.
Now, I kind of wish that we were ending on that nice high note, but I'm not going to let that prevent me from asking this question, because I believe in asking the really challenging questions. So earlier we were talking about wages and affordability in our area, and then we segued into sports, and then you had mentioned around human rights. So I wanted to come back to that, because what we see when it comes to human trafficking is that it's when we're having the large events that we see astronomical spikes. Now, of course, in Seattle, we've got a large issue with human trafficking that we just flat out don't talk about. And we've got very high wage earners, and we have desperation. And we're resourceful. So we're going to do what we need to do, and unfortunately take huge risks. When we're planning these sports events, when you spoke of human rights, is that factored in, or is human trafficking a whole different segment that we're planning for?
Well, I can tell you it was absolutely factored in to our bid for the FIFA World Cup application. And it is very much top of mind for us with these other events. So the opportunity comes back to the collaboration. The Port of Seattle, trafficking is a huge priority for them to focus on and find solutions for that. So that's one of the reasons why the Port of Seattle actually joined the Sports Commission recently. And it's the executive director of the port who joined, because this is an opportunity for them to work with not just the Sports Commission. Again, we're the convener. I can't solve the trafficking, but I can help be part of the solution by bringing people together. So for All-Star, we worked with Homeland Security and Visit Seattle and the hotel community to create awareness for the front office staff for the hotels, what are the signs to look for when trafficking is taking place. So those are just a couple of examples of where we can start to make inroads. I think we have truly an opportunity to focus on it in a much deeper way in the next 3 years as we get ready for World Cup. We don't want it to be a superficial effort, and it's going to take a lot of work with those stakeholders to be involved, so that we can find ways where we can mitigate and wherever possible do no harm, right? Not create opportunities for it. So it is a priority. It's not something that just do these 3 things. To me, it's about what can we initiate now and be part of our culture as when we bring in any sporting event, that we're considering those things and working with those local community stakeholders.
Thank you for that. So we're going to wrap with a couple of questions, fun ones, I think. One is, what are some of the upcoming events that are coming down the pipeline in the next few years? I know we talked about World Cup, but the one I'm interested in is the one that's coming up in January. If you know me, I love hockey. And then second, how can members of our audience, people that are watching, how can they become more involved civically, otherwise, with the things that the Sports Commission's doing?
Great. Well, events coming up. Before we get to your favorite event, we have one in October that'll be out at Magnuson Park, and it is the National Flag Football Gay Bowl. So it's flag football for the LGBTQ community, and it's a national event. And Seattle was awarded the national tournament here, so that's exciting. And then, of course, on New Year's Day, the NHL Winter Classic will be coming to Seattle, which is very exciting. So if you don't know what that is, it's an outdoor hockey game. It's the only one that is played outdoors, and in Seattle, it will be in T-Mobile Park. Who'd have thought that you'd have a hockey game in a ballpark? But one of the benefits of that facility is that, of course, you can close the roof and you can close just half of it, so it'll cover up the rink. And so you still get the outdoor experience, but protect that rink. So that's coming up. And then next June, we have the KPMG Women's PGA Golf Tournament Championship. So that's exciting that going back to more women's events, it's a great showcase, and we hope to help them grow that event. In 2025, we will have the NCAA Men's Division I first and second round basketball tournament. So that's going to be a really big deal. That'll be at Climate Pledge Arena. So there's a number of events that are mid-size in scope, and it's one of the things that I am very sensitive about when we are bidding on events is I don't want to overtax or overburden our city and city services. And the lead up to a FIFA World Cup is extraordinary. So I didn't want to bring in another multi-day citywide event that would distract us from the work that we need to do for World Cup. So, but still lots of great events coming up. And there's more that are in the works that we hope to be announcing in the next 6 months or so. So look for that. And then how to get involved. You know, what I would say great examples are some of these events, whether it's the Women's PGA Championship or an NCAA event, they need volunteers who have some expertise, have some knowledge around that particular sport. And then we also need volunteers who are willing to greet people or work on site at the event. So it's a great one for these events are great for like sports interns or event management interns that are young professionals. So you can reach out to the Sports Commission. SeattleSports.org is our website, and we've got an info at. You can send us a note, and we'll put you on our volunteer database when we are in need.
Thank you, Beth. Round of applause for Beth.
My pleasure.
Please. So informative. Well, I just want to thank everyone who's been here tonight, our guests, our panelists, our staff, our team, the collective. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I hope it was educational for you as well. We hope I'm going to invite you to a few more things now. You don't have to do all of them, but you should. But we'll be right back here actually on September the 27th for our Re-Engage fundraising series, because we're a nonprofit and we need to raise money. So hopefully you'll join us back here. We're going to be doing a fireside chat, but with Jonathan Sposato. So tech engineer legend. It's going to be a lot of fun. In October, we'll be back here for our next cocktail. I think it's the 4th of October. And we'll be talking about some of the policies that are happening or going to be voted on in the city of Seattle as part of the election that's coming up in November. And because we're having an election in November, we're doing those 4 debates that we told you about earlier, districts 1, 3, 4, and 5. And they are free to attend, so we hope to see you there. Please let folks know in those districts that they can come to that, because they're going to be electing a whole new person. So voter engagement and voter education is super, super important. We'll be back here in November post-election to talk about what happened, but I think we're also going to talk about emergency preparedness. Like how is Seattle prepared with everything that we're seeing in Hawaii and other parts of the world? It's really good for us to be able to know regionally what we can expect and how we can be prepared. And then December will be our year in review. So with that, thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this, please go to our website and make a donation. We can't do this without your support. And again, thank you and have a good evening and have another cocktail. Take care.